Hi, this is Andy, and I'm going to show you how I make baklava. Let's start with the filling. I've got some finely chopped walnuts, granulated white sugar, and cinnamon all mixed together in a glass bowl. I've also got two sticks of unsalted butter, melted, not all the way, not too melted, not so it's runny, but just so it's got a little bit of thickness to it. Now I've got this aluminum pan, and I'm going to spread the butter using the brush all along the aluminum pan, along the sides and the bottom, to give it a good coating. There's not a way you can use too much butter here, really. You want to be very liberal so that this prevents anything from really sticking to the pan, because we're working with some really sticky materials here in a little while. So I'm going to coat the entire pan all the way around, make sure I've got it good on the bottom and all sides. Now it's time to pull out the phyllo dough. Now, phyllo dough can be tricky to work with your first time, so don't be upset with yourself if you ruin a couple of sheets. Odds are you're going to have some left over. Just take your time, take it easy, and treat it like you would very gentle paper. That's basically what it is. So what I've got is a moistened cloth. I got it pretty soaking wet and wringed it out really well, and put that down at the bottom. Now that's going to keep the bottom layers nice and moist, so by the time I get to them, they're still usable. And it also will work to help me manipulate the dough, so I can kind of grab the corners of the cloth and use that to help me lift the dough out. So I'm going to take my pan, bring it over, and get a good size for how big my sheet should be. And I'm lucky. I've got a line right in the dough already that I'm going to use to cut. So I'm going to score the sheets of phyllo dough as far down as I can. And this will take a couple of cuts. I'm also trying not to cut the cloth here so my wife doesn't kill me. All right. Once I've got them scored, I'm going to roll up the remaining phyllo dough, and I can do something fun with that later. In fact, there's some really great recipes on the web for macaroni and cheese with phyllo dough and lots of other desserts. So go take a look and you'll find something you can use this other phyllo dough with. And what I do is I just roll it up, wrap it in a moist paper towel, and then in a baggie, and stick that in the fridge. And that should keep for a day or so, maybe two. Here comes my assistant to grab that and do just that. All right, it's time to get started. So I'm going to grab a sheet of my phyllo dough, lay it in the pan, off to one edge. So my width is right, but my length is a little short, so I'm just going to stagger these. And you always do 2 sheets for every layer. So there's my first layer. And now we need to brush this with butter. Again, be very liberal with the butter. I'm mixing the butter here because it kind of separated a little bit, and I want the same kind of creamy consistency all the way through. So I'm going to do my edges first, and the reason why I do that is it kind of gets it to stick to the edge, and it allows me to do the center easier without the phyllo dough wanting to move around on me too much. So I'm putting a good layer of butter all across the phyllo dough, making sure I get everything covered. It's okay if it pools in a little bit here and there. It's not a big deal. All right, now you could just dump this in the pan, but I like to spoon it. It's easier to keep the right layer and the right thickness, and that's something else you can experiment too. Some people like it really thick, some people like it very thin. It all depends on how much you've crushed up your walnuts, how much mix you have. If you're following my recipe, you should have just enough to go about 3/4 of the way up this pan if you follow about my thickness here. But toy around with it. Baklava can be played with for sure. You can try it any way you like it. This is the way I do it. I also like to keep my mix well mixed up, because some of the heaviest stuff tends to get to the top and the finer stuff settle to the bottom. So there's my first layer. And now it's time to throw 2 more sheets of phyllo dough on. So again, I'm going to line up with one edge, grab my second sheet, line up to the other edge, and now line it with butter. Again, now instead of the edge first, this time I'm going to do where the 2 sheets meet. And again, that's to help keep it from moving around too much. Sometimes throwing a hand down on there is what you have to do. Again, it's okay if it pools. I want to make sure I just get a good uniform cover. There we go. Now I'll repeat the process. I'm going to grab some more of my mix and spoon it in. All right, now I've done all my layers. I'm out of mix, and now I'm going to do the top crust. And the top crust is simple. It's just more layers of phyllo dough. You just keep doing phyllo dough, no mix in between. So I put down a layer, phyllo dough, and this time I'm buttering each and every sheet. I'm not doing 2 sheets at a time. So I put one sheet down, Get all the butter on. And then I'm going to grab another sheet. I'm going to stagger them again, just like I did before. And butter that sheet as well. If you're not quite as fast as me, don't worry about it. You'll pick up your speed as you do this more often. All right, now as a final touch, I like to throw a little cinnamon sugar on there. This is a mix my wife put together. This is totally optional again. If you don't want to see this on there, if you don't want it up there, I think it gives it a nice color, kind of a finishing touch. But lots of people don't put it on top. Totally up to you. Okay, I'm going to set my oven to preheat to 375. And while that's going, or once it's preheated, I'll throw that right into the oven. And I'll set my timer now for 40 minutes. All right, and while I'm waiting for the baklava to bake, it's time to make my syrup. So I've got a 1/4 cup of honey, a cup of sugar, and a 1 1/4 cups of water. And I'm going water first, then honey, then sugar. Get that up to a boil, mix it all up really well. You want some of the water to evaporate off here, and that's why I added that extra 1/4 cup there. Our baklava is still baking. All right, and we're done. So now I'm grabbing my syrup, which I just let cool. After I got it boiled and mixed, I just turned off the heat and let it sit and cool on the oven for a little while. And now I'm adding this right on top of the hot baklava. And I want to make sure I cover as much of the top as I can because it's pretty bubbly, and this will help it kind of shrink down just a little bit. So there'll be lots of sizzling as you throw this in as it heats up. Get as much out of the pan as you can. And now you're going to let that set and cool to room temperature. When that's done, you can cut this up into triangles, any way you like actually, into squares if you prefer. Transfer it off into some other dishes or wrap them up individually in some cellophane, and then go ahead and stick them in the fridge. I like them cold. It makes them a little thicker and a little easier to cut up with a fork and eat. And this is what it looks like when it's done. You've got a nice thick layer of walnuts, sugar, honey, and just a great tasting dessert. You're going to love this. I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions, shoot them into the comments. Thanks.